do want to welcome everybody who's joined so far to this. It is our first of its kind webinar hosted by Bentley, Koup, and Dr. Taylor. Today, we're going to talk about the COVID-19 vaccine and answer some of the most common questions that we've been hearing from the Dasher community. We are also taking questions live. You can pop into that Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom. I'll be reading through those and answering answering the most popular ones as we round out our time today. I do want to note the discussion today is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider. I want to give a brief intro and then I'm going to turn it over to Bentley, the best MC in the business. But first, Dr. Taylor joins us today. He is both a practicing physician and the VP of Medical Affairs at Doctor on Demand. As a practicing physician on Doctor on Demand's platform, he actually has many Dasher patients, so super familiar with our community here. He's joining us today to shed some light and answer those common questions on the COVID vaccine. Bentley Koup, you probably know, he's a Dasher, he's an entrepreneur, and he's host of the YouTube channel DoorDash Diaries. He, like me, is based in Charlotte, North Carolina, where he lives with his wife and raises his family. He started his YouTube channel as a way to help other Dashers succeed on the platform. So check it out if you're looking for tips and tricks for succeeding with DoorDash. He has over 10,000 deliveries on the platform, so he is definitely an expert. And I am going to pass the mic his way to get us started.
Yes. First of all, again, I just want to thank everybody for joining. I appreciate you for taking your time. Shout out to my T3D community. Dr. Taylor, I'm going to call you Doc, okay? We're going to be family, all right? We're going to be close. Right. I appreciate you for taking your time. Good. Definitely appreciate you for taking your time. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, okay? So I got questions, okay? And I can ask questions, but I want to know about the man. And that's why I was asking you, where you from? What school you went to? Are you a White Sox fan? You know, like what do you do outside of work? So the one question before I get to these COVID questions is, we've already talked about you being a doctor. What made you want to be a doctor? Like what was the decision in your life that, what made you want to be a doctor?
Well, you know, my father worked on the railroad, talked to me about it from early on. But, you know, one of the pivotal things in my life is I was a freshman in college and my mother called me one cold December morning and said my favorite uncle, Uncle Maurice, passed away overnight at age 43. And he had had a massive heart attack. And I can go on and tell you why he's my favorite uncle. He is a really good time guy. He smoked. He didn't exercise. He was overweight. He was wonderful, a jolly guy. But unfortunately, the heart disease caught up with him. And there was another uncle who got affected by smoking. Both of them were smokers. So that really persuaded me to kind of want to work upstream and try to prevent some of that sort of stuff.
So it means a lot to you to be of service to the community and make sure that people understand that they need to take their health seriously.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely. Awesome. I appreciate that. All right, so I'm just going to jump right into it. One of the main questions that everybody has is, was there any type of special process that was used to actually make this? Like what is the process that was used to make the vaccine?
Well, I want to put in perspective for people, Bentley and the whole community, that, you know, we've had vaccines from a long time, going back to the polio vaccines long before I was born. But, you know, many of us know about flu and mumps, which are viruses, by the way, where we have vaccines. We have the childhood vaccines for chickenpox and mumps and so on like that, diphtheria, which are all kind of lumped together in a vaccine. And flu vaccines have been familiar to many. So most of those vaccines go by a process that we've had for decades and decades, where we're basically taking the overcoats from an inactivated vaccine, and these protein overcoats are either made into a vaccine and injected into a muscle cell, you know, like your shoulder muscle, or for kiddies, hip muscle, the gluteus muscle. And then we also have newer inactivated virus vaccines where they, since we've had DNA technology and stuff over recent years, been able to manipulate the vaccines and test tubes so that they don't cause serious illness, but they act as tools for medicine. And so those are most of the flu vaccines that we know of now are like that. There are a couple of different types of flu vaccines, but these new vaccines are a totally new technology. I'm happy to answer questions about that.
So, so the process that they use to make this vaccine is very similar to the process that they use to make the flu vaccine. Am I understanding you correctly?
No, it's actually different. So that's what
Oh,
I'm saying. This is what we call messenger RNA. So
right.
some people, I want to just do a little biochemistry with people. What's in the nucleus of our cells that we call our genes is DNA, okay? But RNA exists out in what we call the cytoplasm of cells, and it creates proteins that are used for all sorts of things like enzymes and so on that help the body function. So these new vaccines are focused on messenger RNA, and they never get into the nucleus of the cell. So they never touch our genes, they never touch our DNA, they don't come from DNA, they're a messenger. And the way I like to explain it to people, these are kind of like a code, okay? And the code is just like you have a credit card and you're going into somewhere, Einstein's Bagel or someplace, and you're going to buy something, and you take your credit card and you insert it or swipe it in that machine, and something good happens. Well, this is exactly the same thing as what happens with messenger RNA, because basically the code is used to create a protein that is the same as the spike protein of those little spikes you see sticking out in all those diagrams of what the coronaviruses look like. And so that allows the body to then create antibodies and to activate fighter cells in our immune system called T cells that are ready for if you come in contact with the virus, they're ready to kill it as soon as it comes in your body. So if I can break it down, that's how this basically works.
And so I just want to be super clear. So you're saying that this isn't actually, you're saying like this is a synthesized version of the virus that they're giving us. This is a
no, it's a code. It's
okay.
a code that makes a protein. So in the outer portion of our cells, we have these things called ribosomes, which are little factories. They're little mechanisms that create proteins of all kinds. And what tells the ribosome what kind of protein to make is a code from RNA. It's also called messenger RNA. And that's what is new about these vaccines. Now, it's not brand new because this wasn't invented just yesterday or last year, but actually our tax dollars have funded the research on all this. So this is an investment coming back to us that the National Institutes of Health has made, and it's been done in labs both in Germany and the United States. So we've been leading the world in this technology.
So that brings me to two other questions. So you said this isn't new. So what other drugs have they like used this messenger RNA to like help create, or what other drugs?
Well, Bentley, it's a really good question you answer and that you asked me. And the answer is it takes many, many years to do basic scientific research to finally get a product that works, okay? So they were working on this for a long time, for decades, basically, let's say 17 years, we can simplify it, but they didn't have anything as a product to focus on. When COVID came along, everybody in the scientific community just about stopped what they were doing, at least in the life sciences, and pivoted to how can we help with COVID? So this technology was sitting there in the first months of the virus. The Chinese actually gave us the code, the genetic code for the virus. And at the National Institutes of Health in Germany, they started working using this new technology to produce a vaccine in record time, in 6 months. So it was international cooperation between the scientists in the US and in Germany that created at least the first two vaccines. That's the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine.
So Doc, I'm gonna throw you a curveball, okay? So what, and be honest with me, right? What's the difference between doing steps simultaneously and cutting corners, right? So for me, right? For me, it's like when I think about building a house, right? I can't put the roof before the foundation, right? And I can't put the walls before the roof, right? So in my mind, when I think about making a vaccine, right? I think that there are certain steps that need to be done, right? And you can't, and there again, I'm just a regular person, right? But it's hard for me to think that you can test something that you don't have yet, right? So how, at what point, like how do I know that they're not cutting corners? But
Well,
simultaneously,
the reason is because there are a lot of animal studies that are done. So the National Institutes of Health has hundreds of laboratories clustered mainly around Washington, D.C., and they have others in medical schools all across the United States who are affiliated. So what they did is they put out a call for people starting to do studies on all this. So they did studies on rats and rabbits, and then more sophisticated animals like chimpanzees and rhesus monkeys. And so they did all these studies very rapidly before they decided it was safe to do the technology to put the vaccine basically into humans. So starting in the fall, they recruited 40,000 people in the United States to be part of the vaccine trial. And they deliberately tried to make it a diverse group of different ages, people of different ethnicities, so on and so forth like that. So there's more I can answer about that. But basically, that's how all vaccines and all medicines have to go through that to get approved by the Food and Drug Administration. You start basically finding out, is it safe in animals? Is it safe in humans? Then, is it effective? And that's what they call phase 3 studies. When you find out, is it effective? And then finally, after those phase 3 studies, they say, okay, it looks effective and safe to release in the general population, like we have now in vaccines.
so some of the steps that we're doing simultaneously are more towards the end and not necessarily in the beginning part of like the actual finding the cure, finding like the cure to the vaccine part, right?
Well,
so you just
Bentley, the way I would explain it is all this has happened, and it may be a bad term to use, sort of at semi-warp speed. Warp speed
okay,
may have a bad connotation in some circles right now, but what I would tell you is all of this has happened much faster than usual, but no corners were cut. That's what
right.
the Food and Drug Administration is there to protect us as the American population about, is no corners were cut at any point.
Awesome. All right, Doc. I'm sorry. I didn't want to dig in too much, but it's just as you're talking to me, I got, just other questions are sparking up. I just got other things that I want to ask you. And one of the things that came up to me before, so Corona as I know it, COVID as I know it, is new to me, but it sounds like that this has been around in some way, shape, or form before. Like you said that they've been working on this for decades. Like, can you talk about that just a little bit?
So one of the things we need to understand is coronaviruses have been around for a long time. Actually, they've been around for thousands of years, but we've just learned about them through research more and more over the last few decades. But the common cold is a coronavirus. What's different is that COVID-19 is a novel virus that the world never saw before late in 2019. So it's a new virus that nobody has any immunity to, and that's why it's so dangerous.
So we
don't have any way to fight it naturally because nobody on the planet has seen this virus before.
So when we think about it, so we got coronavirus and COVID-19, like we have dogs and pit bulls. Does that make sense? Is that a correct correlation? So like COVID-19 is like
COVID-19 is like a pit bull among dogs, right?
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
And a bad, we have a pit bull at home. So the natural inclination of pit bulls are very sweet. So pit bulls have to be raised to be mean, just so we know that.
15 years in insurance. I'm gonna tell you, don't you tell your home insurance guy that you got that pit bull at your house. Okay. Don't you tell him that. You're gonna give him a heart attack. Okay. You're gonna get a letter in the mail. Doc.
Okay.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay. So we talked about some of the origins of coronavirus and some of the ways that they actually make the vaccine. So talk to me about the side effects. Like what are the side effects?
So the basic thing I want people to understand is that the side effects of the vaccine are very similar to that of flu vaccines, okay? So basically, you get the shot in your arm. You usually are going to have some soreness there. Almost everybody gets some degree of feeling some soreness, and it generally goes away in a day. Some people, it may last 3 or 4 days, okay? People have different sensitivities. About 10 to 15% of people who get this new vaccine get a flu-like syndrome, where what they did is that they get chills and they get headachy and they may get a little fever. Now, we're going to come to this, but my son, who is a registered nurse, got the vaccine. And on the second shot for Pfizer, not the first shot, but the second shot, he got some of that. And it lasted exactly 16 hours because he texted me and told me about this through the whole thing. He was able to get up and go to work and function fine. We're getting to this too. I've had the Pfizer vaccine. I got it on December 8th, and I got the second shot. And I got no reaction whatsoever, not even significant soreness in my arm with the first shot. The second shot, I got a little bit of fatigue, but it wasn't anything that a cup of coffee couldn't fix, and I didn't miss a day of work. But everybody is different, everybody is different. And I'm happy to answer questions about the rare, more severe types of reactions, which are allergic reactions we call anaphylaxis. And that's getting all swelling up with hives. And if it's not treated with an epinephrine shot, it can cause people's mouths to swell and have trouble breathing and so on. So that's something you may want to get into if you want to. But those are very rare. So to give you an idea, like it's usually between 2 to 5 people out of 1 million getting a shot. So it's not insignificant, but that's part of why every place they give the shots, you have to be observed. You have to sit down like in an auditorium and be observed for at least 15 minutes before they let you go.
Okay, so that was going to be my question. Okay, so I get the shot. Somebody's going to watch me for 15 minutes to make sure that I don't need the epinephrine because that's on hand, right? So you're confirming that for me. Okay, so then I go home. So after the second shot, I don't have to worry about anything creeping up on me 2 or 3 weeks from now, or like any type of side effects like that may come up after.
I would say that generally, I prepared a little something I want to share with people because I think this is going to root us for everything we're going to talk about today. Okay. So the COVID-19 vaccination raises some unanswered questions for the whole world and for regular folks. It helps become as informed as possible about making decisions about getting this vaccine and to realize that information may be changing rapidly based on new research. We will be learning more about COVID vaccination safety from human studies that are continuing to enroll people around the world. Meanwhile, we can all stay informed by checking trusted health websites, such as that of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and from talking to your local healthcare clinicians. So together, you can balance the latest data on the risks of the COVID-19 infection, which I want to come back to, the safety of the vaccines, your individual risk factors and exposures, and most importantly, your own values and preferences. So I wanted to say that to kind of ground us, because, I'm not here to preach to people. I'm not here to scold anybody. I'm here just to talk about what the science is as we know it today. That may change next week, and I'm happy to get into that and answer questions about that.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if you remember, but the first time we talked about this, and I told you that I have never had the flu, and I do not get the flu shot, right? I don't like needles at all, right? I don't like needles at all, but I do have serious concerns about, COVID-19 and the effects that it is having on the world as we see it today. And I want to get back to whatever normal is going to be, and I want to be able to make the right decisions for me and my family. So there again, I definitely want to thank you for that. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Bentley, let me just share one thing that I think is central to everything we're going to talk about today. What these vaccines do is they prevent serious disease. What does that mean? That means going in the hospital. People have been in the hospital for weeks and then died, but some have survived. Being in the hospital, being weakened, not able to take care of yourself, maybe having to go on a ventilator. A lot of those people have had to be in the intensive care unit. When they come out of the hospital, they're not walking and jumping out of the hospital. They're being wheeled out of the hospital in a wheelchair. The survivors, they don't look good and they feel bad for weeks afterwards. So what I want to let people know, that's what the vaccines prevent. And I want to come back to that at the very end, because I want to share some statistics with the audience that are sort of part of the take-home message.
Go ahead. You share the statistics now. We talking about it now. We can talk about it now.
Okay, all right.
Get the numbers.
So Dr. Clyde Yancey, who is a top professor of medicine at Northwestern, where I live, Northwestern University, breaks it down like this. He said, what I want people to know is if 75,000 Americans got the shot and 75 identical Americans did not get the shot, what happens based on everything we know is that 150 people in that second group who did not get the shot are going to die. Hundreds more are going to be in the hospital sick for weeks. Whereas in the other group who got the shot, nobody is going to be in the hospital. Nobody is going to die. Now that's the take-home message.
That's very powerful. And I know that is the one thing that we want to avoid, right? You think you don't want to be in the hospital, right? And we definitely don't want to lose our lives or anyone that's close to us. And I think that's the ultimate goal. And my dad is 64 and has chronic disease, right? He has chronic kidney disease. And I am trying to explain to him the overall importance of, getting a shot. And old school doesn't trust doctors, right? And he does the same thing that I did to you when he comes in the room, right? He asks, how long have you been a doctor? Why did you want to be a doctor? And specifically, why did you pick this, this type of, so yeah. So just talking about that. So what talking points do you have? Like, what can I talk to him about as far as the importance of him and his chronic, is why he should get the shot?
Well, one of the things that, again, not being preaching, but just sharing, is to understand that people who have risk factors, especially if they're a little older, so I'm guessing that your dad is probably over 40 and he may be over 50, but combination of aging as well as common conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, being overweight, and the list goes on, those add up to increased risks of dying from this condition and increased risks of being hospitalized. We see this every day on the news. We see this every day. So believe it. That's what I would say to people about that, because it's just, it is just terrific. And I would tell you that in my family, my wife's cousin got hospitalized from COVID. And back in Detroit, where my wife's family is from, quite a few older people have died from this condition. So it's by 2-3 degrees of separation. It's not hard to find somebody who's been seriously affected and had the serious illness.
And I think that's the biggest thing that's the one thing that scares me the most is there's no common denominator. It's not like all old people are getting it or all young people are getting it. You see stories of people who run marathons, who are passing away from it. You see the stories of older people, getting it. And it's really scary. It's really scary. And I think that's one of the reasons why people really want to get, as much information as they can about whether the vaccine is the right decision for them or not. So
I should also share on Doctor on Demand, because we serve Americans nationally. I have had the privilege of serving hundreds of people who have had COVID to various degrees, call in from the privacy of their home, or they call in from a break room at work. Some people are merely worried. Some people want to help you understand, or they just have a cold, or they have the flu, or could it be the COVID? But like I said, I've seen hundreds of people myself who have tested positive for it. So we're helping those people with knowing what they can do to deal with the symptoms, help them understand the current guidelines of when going back to work. And some people, we've had to guide them to get on over to the emergency room and understand that people have actually passed away overnight when this really gets bad.
Wow. Yeah. It's a dire situation. And that's one of the reasons, again, why I want to thank you for coming here today, Doc. I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you, definitely.
Well, it's a privilege for sure. It's a privilege. And when we're getting down to the last couple of minutes, let me know. But I hope we can, deal with all questions that come through today.
Yeah, I was going to ask him.
Yeah, I think we're getting pretty close to time here. And no, at least on the East Coast, we're hitting up against dinner peak, so want to let people get out on the roads. But did have a ton of questions come in through the channel. We'll answer a few of them now, and then we'll follow up in our weekly Dasher Digest and with emails as much as we can. So stay tuned through those channels. But a couple major ones that I wanted to bring up, a few for DoorDash, Dr. Taylor. So first, there was a question from quite a few people around whether or not DoorDash was planning to make the vaccine mandatory. DoorDash is not planning to make the vaccine mandatory. The purpose of this session is really to make sure that you have the information that you need to make the decision that's right for you. And I think that's what Bentley shared and Dr. Taylor shared throughout. And then the second, there are tons of questions around when you can get the vaccine yourself, depending on where you live. And so my best advice is to head over to the COVID-19 Resource Center for Dashers. There you can find a link for every single state. Each state is a little different in terms of how they're prioritizing essential workers and moving through each of the phases of the vaccine. So we've shared the links to every state's individual page there. And that's where you're going to be able to find the information that's specific to your location. That said, we are going to do our best as we get information at DoorDash to pass that along to you via email and on that resource center. I'm going to sound like a broken record. So please continue to keep an eye on your inboxes and on that website, and we will do our best to get information out to each of the individual local markets as timely as we can. I think those are like the main sort of logistical questions. There are a few questions around sort of vaccine process, Dr. Taylor, that might be good to answer before we head off, around whether the vaccine will need to be taken every year, and if it matters whether you take Pfizer or Moderna. Is there a preference if you have certain underlying conditions or anything that people should think about as they move into I'm actually going to take the vaccine now?
Right. I'm glad you asked me that, because the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are very similar. The main difference is it's 3 weeks between the shots for Pfizer and 4 weeks between the shots for Moderna, if I can simplify that. The new Johnson & Johnson shot, I'm expecting to be approved, and I have no vested interest in any of these pharmaceutical companies. But the great thing about the Johnson & Johnson shot is you only need one shot. It's not quite as effective as the others, but it is very significantly effective in preventing serious illness, which is the bottom line in all of this. So that's why I want people to know about that part of it. Was there another part of the question you wanted me to clarify, more so than just about the differences between those shots? Vaccines.
I think that's great. And then if you've had COVID, should you take it? Should you not take it? Do you need to wait a certain amount of time?
Right. That's a good question too. I'm remembering that you asked me something on the previous question about getting it every year. We don't know if booster shots will be needed every year. Studies are going on to see how long the immunity lasts. And so hopefully we won't need to get shots every year, but it's possible, like with flu shots, those need to be done every year because the viruses mutate, so it may be. So that may be needed. Now, if you've had COVID, people are supposed to wait until at least 3 weeks has passed after their COVID symptoms before getting the shot. So it is recommended that you get the shot if you've had COVID already. But like I said, that's a personal decision people will have to make. Because if they've had COVID, they should be forming some antibodies and some immunity towards getting, like we said before, serious illness and ending up in the hospital.
Thank you so much, Dr. Taylor. As it gets very dark here, I think it's probably time to let our incredible community and attendees head back. I want to thank you, Dr. Taylor, so much for joining us. If you don't know, we do have a partnership with Doctor on Demand where Dashers can get $4 telehealth visits. That's urgent care or behavioral health. If you Google DoorDash Doctor on Demand Dasher Help, you'll find it right away, and all of the details will be there. I want to thank Bentley so much, our incredible host for today, for sharing his perspective and his questions and doing what he truly does best. And I want to thank you all so much for joining. We may send a survey to find out how you felt about the event, so please let us know if you see that come through. We'd love to hear from you and hear if doing things like this in the future is something you'd like to see more of.
Well, thank you for having me speak today.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Taylor. Thank you,
Thank
Ben.
you, Dr. Taylor. Definitely, Emma. Definitely. Shout out to you, Emma. Woo, woo, woo.
Not at all. Take care, everybody.